In this video, we're going to look at making lots of these objects, but first we need to fix one thing. And that is when these go off this edge of the screen, I want them to start back over here. So I want this sort of loop to happen. And so inside the move function, I can say something like if this dot x position is greater than the width of our screen, this dot x position will become 0. So now if I run this again, we'll see it go off the edge and then come back. So that way I get a little bit of a loop. And we saw this earlier on in some of the movement principles that you can review on our website. So now we just have a bit of a loop happening. But now, what if I want to create like 10 of these objects? You know, I could do something that's like let civic, and I'm going to make a civic equal new car, and I'm going to do the same thing down here and call this one a civic. That has a move and a show, right? So now we're getting 3. That's a lot of work, right? If I wanted 10 of these, I would have to do that. And if I wanted to change one thing, it would take a lot of time. So the easier way to do this is I could use a for loop to be able to create lots of objects really quickly. And the way that we make a for loop is by creating an array to store all of our cars. So I'm going to pause this. And the first step I need to do is create an array that's empty. And an array can store numbers, it can store strings or words, it can store booleans, but it can also store objects. So I think the easiest one to call this is because we're making an array full of cars. I'm going to write let cars equal a blank array. And that's the 2 square brackets with nothing between them. And then I want to make a variable for the number of cars I want to make. So I'm going to say let num cars equal, let's start off with 20. We'll make 20 cars on the screen. And then inside setup, this goes inside setup because we want to create an array of cars inside setup, and then we call that array inside draw. So I'm going to write a for loop for let I equals 0 while I is less than the number of cars that I want. I equals I plus 1. Now, you may see in a lot of examples this statement, I equals I plus 1. So each time the for loop runs, it will add 1 to the value of I. We can shorthand that and say I plus plus. I plus plus means the same thing as adding 1 to the value of. And then I need a curly bracket for my for loop. And so far, all we've done is we've made a for loop that says start at 0, make a variable that starts at 0, add 1 to the value of that variable each time this runs, and run for as long as it's below the number of cars that we want. So this for loop will run 20 times. Inside here, I call the name of my empty array, and then in the curly brackets, I do this. Now, what's happening here is cars I. Because an array is a container of different values, we need to store our object in a particular spot. And so cars I, the first time this for loop runs, will be cars 0. That's the array index 0, the first spot in the array. And then we're going to store inside that spot a new car. And so this is going to run 20 times, and each time this runs, the first time will be car 0, index 0 will be a new car, cars index 1, new car, cars index 2, new car, and each one will get stored there. So we can just do this, play. Nothing's going to happen yet. But if we look at this, cars, print cars position 0, this is index position 0. It's created an object that has a ton of new information with all of the constructor functions we had. So it's going to start at position 10, y position 34, a width of 47, a color of 19, and a speed of 2. If I rerun this, we'll get something a little bit different probably. Yeah, so that speed is way smaller, a more red color, different x position, y position. And so this is going to go all the way up to 19 because it starts at 0 and it's never going to reach 20. So I've got 20 different cars inside this array. And I know that because if I do cars.length, .length is a function that shows us the amount of objects inside the array, and we should get 20. So when you have .length attached to the variable name of an array, you will see that it shows us the amount of objects inside that array. Zoom back out. So that's the first step, is now we've stored 20 cars inside our array of cars. The next step is, comment these out, is we use a for loop again to basically do what we did down here, which is calling the specific functions of that class. So for let I equal 0, while I is less than cars.length, because the reason I'm using cars.length is I want this for loop to run for only as many objects are inside this array. And later on, you'll see that sometimes the numbers of the things inside your array can change. And for our purposes, we want to make sure that we're calling this for only the amount of times that it is. If we ask it to run more than the objects inside the array, then we'll get an error. I++. We come down here, and then our functions were .move and .show, but we want to attach those to our array. So cars I dot move and cars I dot show. Now we run this. Now we've got 20 different objects, each one with a different speed, moving all the way across. Shift tab so we can see that a little bit more clearly. If I want only 5, I'm going to go up here to the number of cars, change this to 5, and then this for loop is going to say start at 0, run for less than 5, add 1 to the value each time it runs, and now we'll see only 5 cars. If we want this to run 100 times, now we're going to get all of them going across. Now what we could do is, you see how these are all sort of forming kind of a weird spot right there? So what I would do is actually say, because we're already storing this .w, I would say this y position, this x position, 0 minus this .w. And now we should see those actually, yep, because it's saying this point here minus the width. So now they're going to all start before, and we get a little bit more smooth of an event happening here. And each one has their own individual sort of identity, right? They're moving at different speeds. They have different colors. If I did 1,000, it still works pretty well. Whoa, it's kind of cool. And they're all layered on top of each other. And that's where you can go in and you can have a lot of fun in terms of messing with these numbers, right? if I went in here and I said this.col again, so now it'll affect the opacity. So now we're going to see them all sort of with different opacities on top of each other. And inside this move function, that's where you could take that same idea of what you were doing with getting it to bounce off the edges, or maybe it doesn't reset. Maybe it just runs once. Maybe it changes the stroke weight as it reaches a certain point. This is where you can add in a lot of those different elements.